Hey Defenders, welcome back to the channel. We got a lot happening across the country. Hey, real fast, we just released a video yesterday too, talking about Xbox drills on the range, how you can do them yourself. Go check it out. It's a pretty fun video. It was really windy, so towards the end of the video, the wind, you can start really hearing the wind whipping through there when we were recording it. And you know, hey, it's Minnesota. We're gonna have snow flying sooner than later, and suddenly the state's gonna become an Arctic hellscape. So hooray, winter in Minnesota again. But we'll continue to put out shooting videos though, also when we're, even after the snow flies, we will brave that and freeze our fingers off and be absolutely miserable so we can bring you guys some fun stuff. So check out that video. It's our Xbox drill. We just released that yesterday, okay? But now let's talk about what's happening in Minnesota. A lot of things happening across the country. We've got Zoran Mondani in New York City that just got elected, and we have the election that just happened here for the mayorship in Minnesota. And just as an update on that, we had Omar Fatah failed at his bidded run for the mayorship, and it went back to fray. And that's a big deal. We're going to cover that in the next video. Right now, I want to actually continue on talking about Walz for a minute. Why? Because he just failed a major audit, 12 different auditing points, and conducted by the Minnesota Office of Legislative Auditing. And this is absolutely big because it just goes to show further how much his administration has been perpetuating fraud, or at minimum, letting the fraud flow. Probably means there's kickback somewhere there along the way for himself and the rest of his group as well. But let's dive into this for a moment.
And Paul, Governor Walz says he takes some responsibility for problems in some state agencies overseeing the Feeding Our Future program and the Frontline Worker Pay program. However, he points out no state employee is accused of any criminal activity.
We appreciate the work of the OLA and others.
Governor Walz says he's reviewed reports from the Office of Legislative Auditor and says they'll be helpful preventing future fraud.
There's folks going for lengthy prison sentences, as they should, for stealing money from children at a time of a global pandemic, being held accountable.
The governor followed the criminal trials of the first 7 people charged in the massive $250 million Feeding Our Future case, 5 of whom were found guilty, and says he's aware of criticism from the legislative auditor and lawmakers about state employee oversight of that program.
Time and time again throughout the 4 years that it participated in the child nutrition programs, MDE missed opportunities to hold Feeding Our Future accountable.
The red flags were so many they had to be blinding, and yet $250 million went out the door.
We can always do better. I think, again, context matters. It was a challenging time for everybody, but we certainly want to do better. I think we certainly take responsibility for that. Appreciate the
Now, what makes this all interesting is that, Walz came into office in 2019, and we had a surplus of $17.6 billion. Fast forward 6 years, we are now at a deficit of $6 billion. So now in the hole, going into debt very rapidly, okay? So lots of mismanagement, okay? Now, and this is all before the Minnesota Office of Legislative Auditing actually conducted this internal review on Walz's administration. So a lot of scandals have happened in that time frame. We've had the Rochester orphan scandal that was funding money to Al-Shabaab. We've had the CPAP scandal. We've had the Feed Our Future scandal. Millions and millions of dollars just gone. Now, we've covered a lot of that already in previous videos, so I'm not going to go too much more into the details on those because I want to talk about this audit that just occurred. So the Minnesota Office of Legislative Auditing just went through. They found 12 points of failure by his administration. And this is even more entertaining, at least from a dark humor perspective, where that earlier this year, because of all the fraud that's happening, so January 2025, Walz stood up his own internal fraud unit for investigating fraud in the state. And what better way to control narratives than if you are the apparatus for fraud and you are also managing the unit doing investigations for fraud. So, do what you will with that and ruminate on that and come up with, your conspiracies for that. So, but looking at this, the Minnesota Office of Legislative Auditing came out straight up and said, one, that his new fraud investigative unit was not cooperating at all. Second, that Walz and his administration failed on actually providing and adhering to the criteria that was applied for this audit. So they would not cooperate from that angle either. Now, Walz has just come out and said on the 12 points that they have complied with the recommendations and are doing 11 of the 12 things that were recommended by that office. Now, the OLA, so the Office of Legislative Auditing, they took a sampling from 2022 to 2024 and looked at that time frame, pulling out records, documents, money spending, where money is flowing in the state. And a lot of the things they came up with, again, just were all kind of pointing back to his administration, say. And some of the stuff that they looked at was receipt management and proper handling of documentation of receipts, payroll and timesheet oversights, vendor payments, late and sometimes inaccurate payments to vendors, property and inventory tracking, and event cost recovery. And that's just the basic small stuff. And I say that small stuff, that's big and that adds up. But also are the scandals that are then attached to this well with the massive amounts of fraud. Now, which ones are they were able to tie directly back to that? Well, we're also looking at the oversight of the federal nutrition programs for children. You would also know that as the Feed the Future scandal from 2024. And how that failed was that the Minnesota Department of Education failed to track where $250 million actually went in the nutrition program. Gone, just evaporated. But they were able to actually track down at least 75 million of it thus far, and that number is continuing to increase. And where they found where that money went to were things like luxury items, real estate, travel for his administration, instead of actually feeding children. So other inaccuracies that they found with the Feed the Future scandal, they also found a lack of preparation and monitoring, inadequate site visits and reviews, and dismissive response to this audit itself. Now, in that, we have already had like 72 people rolled up and now arrested and indicted in connection with that scandal. And those aren't just state charges. These indictments, these are charges on a federal level, because the money for the Feed the Future scandal came from COVID-era money with the grants that were coming out of the federal government. In addition to all this, there's even more money being missing, and this is coming from Medicaid and the Department of Health and Human Services, DHS, where they are now seeing that there's $40 million missing from that as well. And that $40 million, where is that coming from? Uncollected payments to providers. This is going to be things like nursing homes, hospices, and the like that were taking in COVID patients. What are some of the listed items? Failure to collect debts. DHS did not pursue recoveries for years, exacerbating taxpayer losses. Inaccurate financial reporting. High-risk program vulnerabilities, recent fraud in autism services and housing stabilization. So in the end, what does this mean? What it means is that the fraud continues, and a lot of fingers are continuing now to kind of point back and back and back all the way to the governorship here in Minnesota. And which is really interesting, because this is, despite all these skeletons, and they're not even in the closet now. This is all public knowledge. This is going national. We got people across the country that are tuning into our channel that are covering some of this Minnesota stuff that's going on with the audits, with Walz, and with the fraud, waste, and abuse that's occurring here. And it's not being hidden anymore. It's not being, and they can sweep it under the rug, but everybody is seeing this. And Walz himself is, I will applaud him, is daring enough to then push and go for to go for re-election for the governorship in Minnesota, which is absolutely shocking. And we would hate to see him get back in, just because, again, the deficit alone and all these frauds and scandals. I mean, this is my money. This is your money out there, the viewers on this channel. So, if this stuff pisses you off, and it absolutely should, go get involved in your political process, okay? Start working that system. How do you work that? Go be an auditor. Go run for city council. Go be on the Chamber of Commerce. Get engaged in your community. You can't sit on a sideline anymore and do nothing and say, well, somebody else will do it for us, or I'll get behind that person if they decide to do something. Because that's a whole lot of ifs and a whole lot of waiting on somebody else. Okay, I've said it before a couple times on this channel. You need to start planting trees whose shade you will never know yourself. This is about your children's future and their children's future as well, about the future of Minnesota and the future of America. So anyways, that's all the stuff that's happening right now for Minnesota, what's going on with the fraud audit that's happening with Governor Walz. So, hey, remember, stay prepared, not scared. God bless and good night, everybody.